Chapter 3. Thou knowest my down-sitting and mine uprising, thou understandest my thoughts afar off. Psalm 139:2. I was in love with my fourth-grade teacher, Mrs. Aronowitz. She was Jewish. When she gave us our assignments on the blackboard, she tiptoed in order to reach the top and the muscles in her legs bulged. She was short like my mother. Her hair was dusky brown and neatly styled to her neck. Her nose was long and fat, and her eyes and lips were large. Except for her pale skin, she looked like a black person to me. She could not have been more than 4½ feet tall. I thought that she was beautiful, but most of the kids in my class thought that she was ugly. I spent more time looking at her than I did in learning my lessons. Mrs. Aronowitz never gave me any reason to believe that I was special to her, but that did not matter. The first girl to come into my life and cause me pain was Frances. Frances was not bad-looking. Much of her beauty was hidden beneath her evil, lying nature, which she practiced on me. She turned my world upside down emotionally, and Mrs. Aronowitz became allies with her. Frances sought my attention. I was, however, much too in love with the teacher to think about Frances. At my age, the only female I liked, other than my mother and sisters, was Mrs. Aronowitz. She was the first female I thought of romantically, and I don't know why. I convinced myself that I was special to her. We had mock fire drills. One day Frances had a brand new white wool hat that her mother bought her. During the drill, her hat fell on the floor, and she accused me of deliberately stepping on it. Frances knew I didn't step on her hat, but she wanted to blame me with hopes of getting my attention. When she told Mrs. Aronowitz demanded that my mother take me to Frances's house to apologize. I told my mother I didn't do it, but she wouldn't believe me. She knew that I could do anything, and she made herself allies with Frances, but this time Frances was framing me. Nevertheless, Ma, I said, I didn't do anything. Buddy, she said, you're always doing something. I pleaded with her to believe me, but she carted me down a beautiful manicured lawn in Red Hook Project to Frances' apartment. My mother had no idea that she had picked up the wrong banner, believing Frances' lie. She didn't know that what she was going to make me do would create a hate in me for Frances for many years. When we got to Frances' apartment, Frances was waiting as if someone was bringing her a prize for winning a contest. They were shuffling me like a pawn. Frances repeated in front of both of our mothers the same lie that she told my teacher. He knocked my hat off my head and got it dirty, she said. I yelled, I did not dirty your white hat, Frances. You did too dirty my white hat, Frances yelled back. She was lying. I wanted to choke her until her eyeballs rolled down her cheeks past her lying mouth. I even wanted to wash her mouth out with ivory soap like my mother did to me once. My mother made me apologize to Frances for something I did not do, and I decided never to speak to Frances again. I hated her. Not even the lie that my sister told on me about not telling me to steal my father's money was worse than Frances' jumbo lie. Mrs. Aronowitz gave me less attention after the incident with Frances. Her lack of attention caused double jeopardy between Frances and me. The secret romance, which I had with my teacher, all vanished away after that lie. I wouldn't look at Frances unless she showed up unannounced before my eyes. My behavior became more aggressive because I felt abused. My studies were less important to me, and I became a problem in school. I don't mean to suggest that anyone was responsible for my early rebellion or lack of interest in school. What happened with Frances and I served to distract me from the important issues of life for a 9-year-old. When I finished the 4th grade, I didn't care much for school. It wasn't Frances' fault, although she gave me a reason to be angry. Mrs. Aronowitz's belief of Frances, or my mother believing Frances, it was a rebellion against what I felt was dishonest and unfair in this life. I spent much time at the Clinton Street movie house. Every Saturday I went into the movies, especially if Tarzan or Superman was playing. Superman influenced my behavior. I imagined myself being Superman by putting a red cape around my neck. I fantasized that I could run faster than a locomotive, fly faster than a speeding bullet, and leap tall buildings in a single bound. When I came home from school, I'd put the red cape around my neck and would walk outside my window 3 stories high. My mother was at work, but sometimes the neighbor saw me and told my mother when she came home. I knew that I couldn't fly, but I imagined that I could, as I was 3 stories from the ground. My mother asked me often if I were crazy. I tried flying all the time in my parents' bedroom. Standing on the top of the headboard, I'd launch myself in the air and plunge to the mattress, wishing to fly. My mother quickly got tired of my acting out my fantasy about Superman, and bought an authentic Superman costume for me. After another few hundred dives to the mattress, Superman finally fell to his death. I imagined that someone killed me with Krypton, because that was the only way Superman could die. When Superman died, Tarzan came to life in my house. I would sit in the movie house and watch Tarzan command the animals, and those Africans with bones through their noses, and paint upon their bodies, to behave. I saw Tarzan as being one lonely man in a loincloth as he overpowered all of those strong-looking Africans and spoke in their language. I wanted to be like him. He fascinated me, When I took a bath, which was only every Saturday, because I didn't feel any more frequent was necessary because I didn't smell, I would put on my bathing suit, strap a rubber knife to my side, and imagine myself fighting alligators and snakes, splashing water all on the floor and on the walls. I imagined that I had an alligator in a headlock, stabbing it with my knife, just like Tarzan. My mother would come to the door and ask me why I was taking so long to bathe. I couldn't tell her that I was killing alligators. I always gave her another excuse. Other than that, I was playing Tarzan. I imagined myself trapped by vicious Africans, with bones pierced through their noses, who tried to hurt me. They had large wooden spears, and I was protecting myself from them with my knife. I was convinced the people who were white, strong and beautiful, had power. I didn't know that this was the way Hollywood made them, and it wasn't the way it really was. When I saw a romantic picture, I never saw any display of affection between people who looked like me in a movie. It was Hollywood's way of telling blacks, "You are not a part of our group." It offended me to believe this. However, I continued to frequent the movies, like the rest with my black friends. Hollywood. By now, I was sensitive about my color. I didn't know anyone who was like me who was strong and in a position of power other than my father. I did see black people sometimes in the movies and on television, but they seemed weak. They were cast as servants, maids, and butlers. Hollywood was playing a game on black folks, and we were buying it. My color became a burden to me. I wondered what it would be like to be white. All of my wondering and wishing couldn't change what I was, a black boy. The Colored Mask. The picture, Imitation of Life, wounded me racially. It was a story about a woman who looked white, but was black. Hollywood was slick. The woman was ashamed of being black, and she crossed the color line. She rejected everything about herself that was black in any way, including her mother who loved her dearly. She escaped the bitterness of bigotry and racial hatred. I felt rejected as I watched that picture. It had a lasting negative effect on my mind. It was at this point that I became angry about being black. It felt as if I had on a colored mask, because I did not feel black. The color of my skin marked me, and that was the only way anyone knew that I was a black. My friend Richard left Red Hook Projects without giving me his address. It did not dawn on me that Red Hook Projects was changing. The whole country, for that matter, was changing. Concerning the races, life began polarizing. One by one, white people started moving out of Red Hook Projects. The color and race issues fully invaded my life, and being a black male became a burden. Mrs. Aronowitz, my fourth grade teacher, was still fresh in my mind, and Frances destroyed the romantic fantasy fling that I had with her. I hated Frances and anyone who looked like her. I didn't hate being black. I just wanted to feel free and not locked into a race color mode. I wanted to remove my colored mask. My fantasy world became larger, and so did all the lies about most of the things that I thought were true. I continued to frequent the movies, and all those people that I saw as heroes were not heroes at all. They were Hollywood's fabricated heroes, and they were nothing like me. The fact that Hollywood did not portray black people as heroic, strong role models hurt me, and the lie continued to get bigger. My fantasies were out of control, and I became hostage to being black. The movies engrossed me, and I fed on Hollywood's cancerous junk food almost every weekend. When I went into the movies, I watched the picture about 1.5 times, and then created confusion. I ran up and down the aisles to be noticed. If the usher didn't catch me and throw me out, I would dash to the staircase that led into the balcony bathroom. After that, I would grab a roll of toilet paper, wet it, roll it up in pieces, and throw it into the projector movie light in order to watch it glitter. I slid down the huge wooden staircase banister from the second floor, and when I reached the bottom, tumbled onto the carpeted floor. Then, I would run inside the theater smacking people on the back of their heads, or throwing paper balls or empty candy boxes at them. I never got caught by the ushers and would exhaust myself clowning around until it was time to go home. My first girlfriend. Major events were taking place in the world, but I had no idea what was happening. Red Hook Projects were my worlds. Except a few outings, visits to the movies, and the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus with my mother, all was well around me. It was 1957, 2 years after Emmett Till, a 14-year-old black boy from Chicago, Illinois, was murdered in Mississippi for saying, "Hey baby," to a white woman in a grocery store. Emmett didn't know his life was in danger of extinction for just being a black boy like me, growing up in America. He had no idea that racist people would torture and murder him, and throw him into a river. I, like Emmett, acted out my romantic fantasies with Hollywood's women of the screen and fell in love with my Jewish teacher, Mrs. Aronowitz. I also had a thing about Tarzan's wife, Jane, and even wanted that woman in Imitation of Life. I had no idea what it would cost me to act out my greatest fantasies in certain parts of the United States. For romance, There was innocence in me. I never thought of the opposite sex with any sexual intimacy until I was about 9 years old, sitting in the movie house, looking at all those women. My first attraction to a black female was Beverly. She was a fair-skinned 9-year-old who had fine hair and a big dimple on her chin. She was much lighter than I in complexion. It was an immediate attraction, and Beverly felt the same way about me. I walked home from school with her often when my friends were not around, because I was teased if seen with any girl by the guys. Beverly lived across the street from me, and before we reached our block, we had to separate, because she lived with her aunt, who was strict. Her mother and father lived in Germany because her father was in the army. Beverly was leaving for Germany the summer of 1957, but the date was not exact. I wanted to take her to the Clinton Theater to be alone with her. My friends and I were close, and it was hard getting away from them, especially on Saturdays, without their asking a whole bunch of questions. I finally worked it out with Beverly to meet during the Saturday show. When I got to the movie house, I sat next to her and did not say a word. I looked at her and smiled. For over an hour, I didn't have the nerve to place my arm on her shoulder. I sat there thinking of the big dimple on her chin and her pink lips and wanted to kiss them. I was marveling at her beauty, looking at her long hair. She was the prettiest girl whom I ever saw, even prettier than Tarzan's wife was, Mrs. Aronowitz was, or any woman who I saw on the silver screen. As I pulled her closer to me, she didn't resist, and I knew that I had her approval. Leaning over to her, I put a closed-mouth kiss on her lips. I instantly fell in love with her. I stayed with Beverly through the entire picture and even remained after, in order to watch it again. I didn't think about running around the theater or throwing wet toilet paper on people or smacking anyone on the back of his head. The world was a safer place in which to live because I was in love. When the school year ended, so did my relationship with Beverly. She left Red Hook and went to Germany. She never said goodbye, and it hurt me. I couldn't believe what she did, and I don't know why. I wanted to believe that her aunt did not give her a chance to say goodbye. My heart was broken, and I felt cheated and lost. I knew that I wouldn't see her again. It was painful. Beverly was on my mind every day, for more days than I care to remember. I hurt so badly. It took me a long time to heal. School became an issue in my life. I just wanted to have a good time. It wasn't anything, in particular, that finally turned me away from school. I just didn't care. The lost relationship with Beverly may have had something to do with my hurt. All I wanted was to draw attention to me. It was as if I needed something or someone special in my life, other than my parents, sisters and a host of relatives. I needed someone to help make me feel special. I was the class clown, who made my classmates laugh. My name, Williams, rendered me last at many things. I got the last seat in the back of the class. I was the last one to get my test paper returned, the last one to walk out of the classroom at the end of the day, and the last one noticed if I needed something. Sometimes I would misbehave in class just to change my seat. Most of the time when I was bad in class, my teacher put me under her desk. We had a substitute teacher who tried her best to control the class. The teacher asked me to stop talking, and I refused. The teacher came toward me, and I got up and ran around the classroom. Students were in an uproar. I was having a ball by not letting her catch me. She had her handbag with a long strap dangling from it in her hand. It was caught on some clothes hangers in the student closet. She continued to run and fell backward. She lay on the floor and played dead. When I walked to her, she grabbed me by my collar and smacked me in my face a few times. The principal called my mother to the school and told her. It was the decision of a few faculty members to leave me in the 4th grade. My mother looked at me, next to him and said, "If you are going to leave him back, then leave him back." I stood spellbound, while my mother changed the course of my life with just a few simple words. I was angry with her for letting those people do that to me, but she didn't care. She knew that she was doing the right thing. She knew that it was for my own good. My mother was just tired of my foolishness. Before the school year was over, a gorilla named Ronald beat me. For no reason known to me, he punched me in my stomach, and I fell on the schoolyard ground. When I hit the ground, he stomped on me and hurt me badly. While I was on the ground, having surrendered, he continued to beat me. Some kids came to my aid and picked me up. It was the first time anyone hurt me viciously. Emotionally, it created a fear in me because I didn't fight him back, and I knew how to fight. Ronald was the second person that I hated, besides Francis. I hated him for violating me, and I vowed to hurt him, even if I had to do it from a distance. Desire. My mother decided to put me in the Cub Scouts. That blue uniform with the yellow and blue scarf made me feel special. I enjoyed the Cub Scouts meetings because I had a chance to be noticed. I memorized the Cub Scout slogan and motto and found pride in reciting them. I didn't grasp fine tasks like the rest of the boys, and that challenged me to do better, because I wanted to do as well as all of them. I didn't like reading the booklet and the text, but I enjoyed listening to our scoutmaster, Mr. Skipper. He was a tall, light-skinned, thin man who was very gentle. I liked him, and he and his wife took a special interest in me. They held our meetings in the police athletic league building in the projects. They held many community activities there. Every week, I learned what it meant to be a good Cub Scout, and it helped discipline me. The Cub Scouts gave me a different direction and created positive motivation in me. The most memorable thing I remember about the Cub Scouts was meeting a guy named Raymond, who was the Boy Scout leader, who took a liking to me. I was the only Cub Scout whom they allowed to go on an overnight camping trip in New Jersey. We all slept in a huge cabin in the woods, and it was the first time I was ever without electricity or heat from a radiator. The cabin had a massive fireplace, and we burned wood in it and used Coleman lanterns for light. We slept in a bunk, which was a piece of canvas stretched between two steel pipes. I couldn't get comfortable in that thing for anything. The pipes were freezing cold, and the canvas sagged in the middle. They teased me because I was the youngest among them and the smallest of all the guys. It was a great experience, but at the end, I was glad to go home. Doing wrong. I had a fascination with fire alarm boxes and always wanted to pull the little red handle to see the fire trucks come screaming down the street. The guys in the black rubber suits with the yellow broad stripes on their pant legs and arm sleeves were great. The fire truck that came to Red Hook had one of those white dogs with the black dots who was supposed to be brave in fires. We called it a fire engine dog. One day I slowly walked to a fire alarm box and pulled down the huge red handle. It started making this clicking sound, and my heart raced as fast as I ran to hide behind a car. Within moments, I could hear the fire trucks with the sirens coming closer to my block. I stood in excitement while the trucks pulled up, and the firefighters searched for the fire. It was a big joke to me. I felt bad about it later when I realized that someone may have needed those firefighters to save his or her life in a real fire. I looked for anything to keep me busy. Sometimes I walked the streets, picked up cigarette butts and smoked them. When I got tired of that, I would find old peach nuts in the street, break open the shell with a red hammer, which I stole from a fire alarm box, and eat the fruity center. I had become a bad little guy, and my biggest problem was me. The hard way. The summer of 1958, I spent much time at the Red Hook swimming pool. I clowned around with my friends, and tried to look at the girls' breasts. My interest in the opposite sex became more focused on intimate body parts, and I enjoyed looking at all the different shapes, sizes, and colors. Once I saw a guy and a girl doing some funny things in the water. They pushed against each other back and forth. The guy had a serious look on his face. The girl had her eyes closed. It didn't take me any more visits to the pool in order to figure out what they were doing, because many people were doing it. After the summer was over, I was convinced that people had sex in the water at Red Hook's public swimming pool. When I returned to school that September, I had to repeat the 5th grade. My parents, as usual, bought brand new clothes for my sisters and me. Returning to school, very sharp, was customary for the kids in my neighborhood. I had a thick tan wool sweater with a pair of dark corduroy pants and new black shoes. The first day of school was always great. I got to see people whom I had not seen all summer, because many went on vacations to relatives, sometimes down south. We would gather in the schoolyard with our unused notebooks with our names neatly written on them. Only a few unfortunate kids would be without any brand new book or new clothes. The first day of school, Ronald didn't jump on me and give me kicks to my stomach. I'm sure I would not have laid on the ground and taken a beating from him again. I would have tried to stomp him as he did to me. I still disliked him, and I would have fought him with hatred in my heart. For the first couple of weeks, all was well for my studies. I really wasn't up to redo my class a second time. They didn't place me in the back of the classroom again, nor was I considered last at everything. They knew I had a strong deviant history behind me, and they were watchful of my behavior.